A teenager helped a lost elderly lady at the airport, but when she revealed who she really was, he couldn't believe it. Everyone around stopped to listen. Michael's footsteps echo across the marble floor of JFK's International Terminal. His worn sneakers stand out against the shiny leather shoes and high heels rushing past him. The 15-year-old boy clutches his weathered backpack against his chest while dodging executives talking on phones and families dragging designer luggage. Conversations in Mandarin, French, and Arabic blend in the air, creating a confusing symphony he knows well. A golf cart carrying VIP passengers zooms by, the driver not even looking sideways. Michael keeps walking, his eyes scanning the gleaming corridors where everything shines, except him. A woman bumps into him while trying to catch her flight, doesn't even apologize. Michael is used to it. Here he is invisible, just like his mother Sandra, who is currently cleaning the first-class bathrooms. The smell of disinfectant mingles with the aroma of gourmet coffee from the cafes. Michael finally reaches his area, a set of blue plastic chairs at gate B42, strategically positioned to see his mother working in the corridors. He settles into the corner chair, the same one as always, the one with a small crack on the side. He takes out his books from his backpack and spreads them on the empty seat beside him. On the other side of the glass, giant airplanes taxi down the runway, taking people to destinations he only knows from geography books. The reflection in the glass shows his young face, the tired eyes of someone who grew up too fast. Another day begins in his makeshift office, where math lessons share space with lessons about social differences that no teacher teaches. Michael opens his crumpled math notebook, the pages already worn at the edges from so much use. His cheap pen sometimes fails, leaving blue smudges between the equations. Across the hallway, his mother Sandra pushes the cleaning cart, her steps slow and methodical after an 8-hour shift. A group of executives hurries past, their Rimowa suitcases sliding silently across the floor Sandra just cleaned. The smell of expensive perfume mixes with the scent of disinfectant. Michael observes the shoes, genuine Italian, his mother always comments, while her own rubber boots make noise with each step. Sandra bends to clean a stain, her faded blue uniform worn from so many washes contrasting with the impeccable suits around her. Michael tries to focus on the exercises, but his eyes always return to his mother. He sees when she discreetly stops to massage her back, a quick gesture that no one else notices. In the row next to him, a woman talks loudly on her phone about a meeting in Dubai, her Gucci bag occupying an entire chair. Michael pulls his patched backpack closer, hiding the tear in the strap that his mother tried to sew last night. A bald executive runs past, eyes fixed on his latest model phone. His gourmet coffee dangles precariously in the cup. Sandra had just mopped that area. Michael sees everything happen in slow motion. The man slightly trips, coffee splashes on the shiny floor. He doesn't even look back, leaving a brown puddle over Sandra's freshly done work. She just sighs, already reaching for the mop again. Another normal day in Michael's office. Sandra bends down to clean the spilled coffee, her already calloused hands gripping the cloth with controlled force. Michael squeezes his pencil until his knuckles turn white. His stomach churns with that familiar mixture of anger and shame. She deserved more than this, much more. The strong smell of gourmet coffee triggers a memory he always tries to push away. His father drinking coffee at the kitchen table 3 years ago, saying he needed to find his own path. The same father who left behind only bills and broken promises. Michael still remembers the sound of the door slamming, Sandra's contained crying in the bedroom. Now she works double, doing overtime whenever possible. Michael sees her moving to the next corridor, her back already curved from the weight of carrying a family alone. This morning, he saw the bills piled on the table. Rent, electricity, the school supplies he still needs to buy. The numbers dance in his mind, more frightening than any equation in his math book. Sandra stops for a moment, adjusting her uniform badge. Michael notices how she always keeps her head high, even when people pass by her as if she were invisible. Last night, he caught her doing calculations on the old calculator, shoulders tense with worry. She tried to hide the paper when he entered the kitchen, but Michael saw the red numbers. Forcing his eyes back to the algebra book, Michael tries to concentrate on the equations, but the numbers get jumbled, turning into figures of overdue bills. The red warning of the electricity bill flashes in his mind. Second copy of the rent, worn-out sneakers that need replacing, his mother saying she'll figure something out, as she always does. Michael scribbles any answer in his notebook, but his mind keeps going back to the pile of envelopes on the kitchen table, each one weighing more than all the books in his backpack. Michael solves a quadratic equation, but his mind does other calculations. Overdue rent, $850, electricity bill with late fees, $143, school supplies still needed, $75. His fingers drum on the table while he mentally adds $1068, almost two of his mother's salaries. He crosses out the wrong answer in his notebook, frustrated at not being able to concentrate. Sandra appears at the end of the hallway, limping slightly on her right foot. Michael knows she needs new shoes for work, but she always says the old ones are still good. She saves every penny for his needs: school supplies, clothes, food. The weight of this dedication crushes Michael's chest every time he thinks about it. He does more mental calculations. If he could get a job after school, maybe at a fast food place. But Sandra insists that studying is his only job now. Education is the only thing nobody can take from you, she always repeats. Michael looks at the equations in his notebook, knowing that each good grade is his way of repaying her sacrifice. Happy shouts interrupt his thoughts. In the arrival area, a family celebrates a reunion. The father, wearing a military uniform, hugs two small children while his wife cries with joy. Michael swallows hard, remembering the hugs his own father used to give, before deciding that his family wasn't enough for him anymore. The family scene continues, the father lifting the children in the air, promises of presents and outings being made. Michael lowers his eyes to his notebook, but the equations are now just blurs. In his mind, another count repeats, 1,095 days since his father walked out the door, leaving only a short note and a void that no mathematics can solve. The laughter of the children with the military father echoes through the terminal, piercing Michael's concentration. He closes his eyes for a second, and the memory invades his mind like a high-speed train. It was a regular Tuesday, but he noticed the suitcase hidden in the bedroom closet when he went to get a clean shirt. His father was never good at hiding things. Breakfast tasted strange that morning. His father stirred his cup without drinking, looking at the clock every minute. Michael remembers the sound of the spoon hitting the porcelain, tick, 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 like a countdown. Sandra talked about dinner, weekend plans, but the words floated in the air without response. He can still hear the sound of his father's footsteps going up the stairs to get something from the room, the creak of the suitcase being dragged, the pause at the kitchen door. That hesitation that lasted an eternity and less than a second. "I need to find my path," was all he said, as if his path couldn't include a 12-year-old son and a dedicated wife. The door closed with a click too soft for such a definitive goodbye. What came after was worse, that heavy silence that swallowed the entire house. Sandra's contained crying in the bedroom, muffled by the pillow. The kitchen clock's tick-tock marking the first minutes of their new lives as a half-family. A dry thud violently yanks Michael from his memories. An elderly lady has tripped over her own suitcase near him, her belongings scattering across the marble floor. The sound echoes through the terminal like a shot, pulling Michael back to the present with the same force that took him to the past. The impact of the lady's body against the marble floor makes Michael jump from his chair. She's fallen a few meters from him, a woman with well-groomed white hair and expensive clothes now wrinkled. Her purse has turned over, spilling lipstick, wallet, medicines and papers across the floor. People pass by hurriedly, some glancing sideways, none stopping. Michael freezes for a second, his previous experiences weighing on his shoulders. Last week, a woman clutched her purse when he approached to pick up a pencil that had fallen. Last month, a security guard followed him for 3 corridors just because he was looking for a water fountain. Being a black teenager at JFK Airport means always being suspect. The lady tries to get up by herself, her hands trembling as she searches for support. Her blue eyes seem disoriented, and she mumbles something about being late. A medicine bottle rolls until it stops at Michael's feet. He looks at his mother at the end of the corridor, remembering how many times she needed help and no one stopped. The lady, must be the age his grandmother would be if she were alive, manages to sit, but her hands shake too much to gather her belongings. Her eyes meet Michael's for a moment. There is no fear in them, only confusion and vulnerability. A boarding pass slides across the shiny floor. Michael feels something stir inside him, the same feeling he gets when he sees his mother needing help. Before he can think twice, he's already standing, moving toward the lady. His concerns about how he'll be seen disappear in the face of the obvious need to help someone in difficulty. Michael approaches carefully, his hands extended in a reassuring gesture. "Are you all right? Can I help?" His voice comes out lower than intended, years of caution at the airport still echoing in his mind. The lady raises her face, some strands of white hair fallen over her eyes. "Oh dear, how embarrassing," she mumbles, trying to straighten her wrinkled navy blue blazer. Michael notices that her hands shake while she tries to collect a medicine bottle. He bends down, starting to gather the scattered items: lipstick, planner, golden pens, leather wallet. "I'm Eleanor," she says, accepting Michael's offered hand to stand up. Her grip is soft, but Michael feels calluses on her fingers, marks of a life of work that contrast with her elegant appearance. "Michael," he responds, surprising himself with the quick introduction. Eleanor searches for something in her now collected bag, her agitation increasing. "What time is it, Michael?" Her voice trembles slightly. He checks the plastic watch on his wrist, a birthday present from his mother. 2:45 p.m., Mom. Eleanor's face turns pale. Her hands grip the bag strap with renewed force. "Oh, no, no, no." She searches through her bag again, pulling out a crumpled boarding pass. Michael peeks at the document. Flight to Boston, departure at 2:30. "The taxi!" Eleanor stammers, her eyes welling up. "It was stuck in traffic for almost an hour. I had so much time when I left home. But now..." Her voice fails. Michael realizes she's still shaking, not just her hands, but her whole body seems small and fragile under the expensive clothes. "I know this airport like the back of my hand," Michael says, taking Eleanor's wheeled suitcase before she can protest. "The airline counter is in Terminal B. I can take you there." He notices how she seems smaller now, all her previous elegance diminished by worry. As they walk down the bright corridor, Michael feels the stares. A woman pulls her daughter closer when they pass. A security guard watches them with excessive interest. Eleanor, lost in her own anxiety, notices none of this. Her hands continue shaking while holding the crumpled boarding pass. Michael guides her carefully, avoiding groups of tourists and hurried executives. "Watch the step here," he warns, remembering how his mother always trips in this same spot during cleaning. Eleanor grabs his arm for balance, and he notices a soft lavender perfume. At the counter, the attendant in blue uniform types quickly on the computer. Her face contorts into an expression Michael knows well. They're the same worry lines he sees on his mother's face when the bills arrive. "Mrs. Thompson," the attendant begins, hesitant. "The next flight to Boston only leaves tomorrow at 9:15 a.m. Eleanor grips the edge of the counter, her fingers turning white. "Tomorrow?" Her voice breaks. Michael notices that the tremor in her hands has gotten worse. "Isn't there anything sooner? Any flight?" The attendant shakes her head, her eyes avoiding direct contact. "I'm sorry. All flights today are full." "My medicine," Eleanor mumbles, her voice shaking more than her hands now. "My suitcase. They've already checked it." Michael observes the sweat starting to shine on her forehead, even with the terminal's cold air conditioning. His own anxiety increases as he notices how she seems paler with each second. Eleanor opens her handbag frantically, spreading papers across the counter. "The brown bottle, high blood pressure, I can't go without." The words come out broken. Michael recognizes the panic in her voice. It's the same tone his mother uses when bills pile up and money doesn't stretch. "Mrs. Eleanor, you need to sit down for a bit." Michael pulls a nearby chair, gently guiding her by the arm. She seems lighter and more fragile than a few minutes ago. The counter attendant watches the scene with growing concern, but keeps her distance. "I have to take it at 5 o'clock, Eleanor whispers, her fingers gripping the edge of the chair. "The doctor said, I can't skip." Her breathing is getting faster, shallow. Michael notices pink spots appearing on her neck, rising to her pale face. The watch on Michael's wrist shows 3:20 p.m. He calculates quickly, less than 2 hours until medication time. Eleanor is now visibly shaking, not just her hands, but her whole body. Her eyes seem unfocused, lost somewhere in the bright terminal. Michael squeezes the $5 in his pocket, his lunch money for the week. He watches Mrs. Eleanor, her hands shaking so much she can barely hold her purse. The money seems to burn in his fingers as he remembers the old bread in the refrigerator at home, his stomach growling during classes. "I'll bring you some tea," he says, standing up before he can change his mind. On the way to the cafeteria, he feels the weight of future hunger in each step. The attendant looks suspicious when he places the worn coins on the counter. "Chamomile tea, please. Very hot." Returning with the steaming cup, Michael finds Eleanor huddled in the chair, looking smaller than before. "Here, ma'am. It will help you calm down." Their hands touch briefly when she takes the cup, hers ice cold, his warm from the tea. Eleanor blows on the drink slowly, the steam rising in spirals. Michael notices a solitary tear running down her wrinkled face. Then another, and another. She tries to hide it, turning her face away, but her shoulders shake with contained sobs. "I'm sorry," she whispers between sips of tea. "It's just, I'm alone in New York. My daughter is waiting in Boston. The medications..." Her voice fails. The tea trembles in her shaking hand, a few drops falling on the clean terminal floor. Michael watches the lady's tears mixing with the spilled tea, thinking of how many times he's seen his own mother crying in secret. "I came to visit my younger sister," Eleanor whispers, clutching the empty teacup. "She has cancer. It was supposed to be just one day to see how she was doing after her last chemo." Her voice trembles, but now she seems to need to talk. "My daughter Sarah is waiting for me in Boston. She's a doctor, always worried about my medications." Michael listens, thinking of his own mother, how she faces everything alone. Eleanor continues, "I called 3 hotels, some medical convention. Everything's booked." She twists a tissue between her fingers. "I've never stayed alone in New York. I don't know anyone besides my sister, and she's in the hospital." The terminal slowly darkens with the end of the afternoon. Michael watches the elongated shadows on the marble floor, feeling the weight of the situation growing on his shoulders. Eleanor seems as lost as the abandoned luggage in The Lost, and found that his mother always cleans. "You're not alone," Michael says, surprised by the firmness in his own voice. "I know this airport better than my own house. We'll figure something out." The words come naturally, even knowing he should be doing his homework, that his mother will be looking for him soon. His cell phone vibrates in his pocket, the cracked screen lighting up with a message. "Son, where are you? I've finished Corridor B. Is everything okay?" Michael looks at Eleanor, then at the message. The setting sun through the terminal windows casts orange shadows over both of them, connecting them in their shared vulnerability. Michael looks at the clock. 4:45 p.m. His mother's shift ends in 15 minutes. His fingers hover over the phone, thinking about how to explain the situation. Sandra always says not to talk to strangers, not to get into trouble. But Eleanor doesn't seem like a stranger now. She looks more like his grandmother in the old photos in the living room. I need to sit," Eleanor mumbles, her voice weaker. The tremor in her hands has gotten worse, and now she's pressing her right temple with her fingers. Michael puts away his phone without answering the message, guilt weighing in his stomach like lead. Eleanor's face is getting paler by the minute. Another notification vibrates in his pocket. His mother again. Michael watches Eleanor trying to open her purse, her trembling fingers barely able to hold the clasp. "Dizzy. Everything's spinning," she whispers. Her words start to drag, as if it took more effort to speak. The clock now shows 4:50 p.m. Michael knows his mother must be putting away the cleaning supplies, worried, probably thinking the worst. Eleanor leans forward in her chair, breathing heavily. "The medications, pressure," she mumbles, her forehead shining with cold sweat. Michael sees the world closing in on two simultaneous urgencies: his mother, who has never had to search for him before, and this lady who seems increasingly ill before him. The setting sun casts orange shadows through the terminal windows, transforming everything into a surreal scene. Eleanor grips the edge of the chair, her knuckles white with the effort of staying conscious. Michael looks down the corridor where his mother always appears, then at Eleanor, who is now breathing in short gasps. His hands shake as he types a quick message to Sandra, but deletes it before sending. How to explain? Words seem inadequate, insufficient. Sweat runs down Eleanor's forehead, her eyes losing focus. Michael feels the weight of choice pressing on his chest. He knows his mother will be beside herself with worry. He knows he might be punished, lose privileges, maybe even have to wait outside the terminal in the coming days. "My son," Eleanor mumbles, confusing him for a moment with someone else. Her words come out slurred, difficult. Michael thinks of his mother, of how many times she taught him about doing the right thing, even when it's hard, even when it costs something. 5 p.m. The clock marks the exact time he should be meeting Sandra. Michael swallows hard, remembering the time his mother cared for the sick neighbor, even after a double shift at the airport. "We help those in need," she always says. "That's what makes us human." Eleanor tries to stand up and almost falls. Michael holds her by the arm, feeling how cold she is. His cell phone vibrates again in his pocket, another unread message from his mother. But now the decision is made. He can't abandon someone sick, alone, needing help. His mother will be worried, maybe even angry, but she raised him to be exactly this kind of person. "Stay here, Mrs. Eleanor. I'll get help." Michael gently squeezes the lady's shoulder, feeling his responsibility grow. Years of observing the airport taught him where to find each type of employee. He knows the faces, the schedules, the best times to ask for help. Down the corridor, he spots Maria from cleaning, who always smiles at him during her shifts. "Maria," he calls, his voice firmer than expected. "Where's the medical station today?" Maria stops her cart, pointing to Terminal C. Michael thanks her in Spanish, one of the many words he learned in the airport corridors. His worn sneakers slide across the floor as he runs, dodging luggage and passengers. Every second counts. He passes gate C15, where Joe, the oldest security guard, makes his rounds. "Joe, I need medical help, urgent." But the guard, who normally watches him with suspicion, notices something different in his voice today. At the medical station, Michael finds Dr. Chen putting away his equipment. "Please," he pants, "an elderly lady, high blood pressure, no medication." His words come out rushed but sincere. Dr. Chen looks at his watch, ready to say his shift is over, but something in Michael's urgency makes him stop. "She's very sick," Michael continues, his heart beating fast. "Alone in New York. Her bag with the medicines already went to Boston." Dr. Chen picks up his medical bag, nodding. For the first time since starting this mission, Michael feels he made the right choice, even though his cell phone keeps vibrating insistently in his pocket. Dr. Chen checks Eleanor's vital signs while Michael holds her trembling hand. "Blood pressure is high," mutters the doctor, pressing the stethoscope against the lady's chest. Eleanor squeezes Michael's hand harder, as if seeking support, not just physical. "My son Thomas," she begins, her voice weak but clearer, now that the doctor has given emergency medication. "He's at Boston General Hospital. Kidney transplant." Her words come out broken, not from dizziness now, but from emotion. "He's been on dialysis for 2 years. They finally found a compatible donor." Michael feels a lump in his throat. Eleanor continues, her teary eyes fixed on some distant point. "The surgery is tomorrow morning. I promised I would be there. I've always been there." Her voice breaks. "Since his father died 5 years ago, it's just been the two of us." Dr. Chen writes something on his clipboard while Eleanor shows a crumpled photo from her wallet. A young man in a hospital bed, weakly smiling at the camera. "He's a music teacher," she says with pride in her voice. "Or was, before he got too sick to work." "I can't miss this surgery," Eleanor whispers, tears silently flowing. "He needs me there. I've always held his hand before every procedure since he was little." Michael thinks of his own mother, how she never misses when he's sick, even if it means losing a day of work. "My father left too," Michael says softly, surprising himself with the confession. Eleanor squeezes his hand, this time offering comfort instead of seeking it. "But my mother, she never gave up, just like you with your son." Her words come out naturally, truthful, born from a shared understanding of loss and love. Dr. Chen finishes noting Eleanor's vital signs, explaining that the emergency medication will help temporarily. Michael partially listens, his mind working on how to get this lady to Boston in time for her son's surgery. The thought of Thomas alone in the hospital waiting for his mother makes his stomach tighten. "You'll get there," he promises, his voice carrying a certainty he didn't know he had. "I'll help find a way." Eleanor smiles weakly, her wrinkles softening for a moment. She runs her free hand across Michael's face, a gesture so maternal it makes his eyes burn. "Michael!" Sandra's voice cuts through the air like thunder. He turns to see his mother standing at the medical station entrance, still in her work uniform, her face a mixture of concern and relief. "Son, I looked for you everywhere. Why didn't you answer my messages?" Sandra stops abruptly, observing the scene before her. Her son holding an elderly lady's hand, a doctor checking vital signs, tears in everyone's eyes. The air in the small medical station becomes thick with unasked questions and necessary explanations. Michael takes a deep breath, preparing to tell everything, hoping his mother will understand why he couldn't just leave. Sandra advances into the medical station, her work boots making noise on the clean floor. "Michael, do you have any idea how much I—" She stops mid-sentence, noticing the tears in Eleanor's eyes, the protective way her son holds the lady's hand. "I'm sorry, Mom," Michael begins, words rushing out. Mrs. Eleanor missed her flight. Her medicines went in her luggage. Her son has surgery tomorrow in Boston. His voice fails, fearing Sandra's reaction. But when he looks at his mother, he sees something different in her eyes. Sandra approaches slowly, her cleaning uniform contrasting with Dr. Chen's white coat. "Mom," she says softly to Eleanor, "my son was taking care of you all this time?" Eleanor nods, still holding Michael's hand. "He's an angel," she responds, her voice choked. "He saved me when I fell, brought tea, got help." Sandra's tired face softens, years of worry giving way to something else. Pride. She puts her hand on Michael's shoulder, squeezing lightly. "That's how I raised him," she says, her voice trembling slightly, "to help those in need." Sandra then does something that surprises Michael. She turns to Dr. Chen. "Doctor, I know the supervisor at the airline counter. I've worked here for 12 years. Let me make a call." She pulls her phone from her pocket, her fingers already dialing a number. "We're going to find a way to get you to Boston today. No mother should be away from her child at a time like this." "Gloria? It's Sandra from cleaning." Sandra steps away a bit, speaking quietly on the phone. Michael watches his mother in action, realizing he's never seen her like this before. No longer invisible, but a force that moves mountains. "Remember when I found your badge last month? I need a favor now." Sandra gestures while talking, years of airport knowledge flowing in her words. Michael notices how other employees greet her with respect. Security guard Joe waves. Maria stops her cart to listen. His mother isn't just the cleaning lady, she's a vital part of this small city within the airport. "Got it," Sandra announces, returning with a smile. "The VIP room is almost empty now. Gloria will let you rest there until we can sort out your situation." She turns to Eleanor. "There are comfortable sofas, air conditioning, even a nurse on duty." Michael helps Eleanor stand up, Dr. Chen still nearby monitoring. As they walk to the VIP room, Sandra explains how she knows every corner of this place, every person. 12 years cleaning this airport," she says. "You learn that kindness breeds kindness." Eleanor starts crying again, but these are different tears now. "You two," she whispers, squeezing Michael's hand and touching Sandra's arm. "A mother and son who barely know me." Her voice breaks with emotion. In the terminal's mirrored hallway, 3 reflections move in sync, an elderly lady supported by a teenager and a woman in cleaning uniform, all connected by something greater than their differences. "You know," Eleanor begins as she settles into the VIP room's soft sofa, "in 1982, I also helped a young mother in the hospital." Her hands stop trembling as she dives into the memory. She didn't speak English, was alone, the baby with a high fever. I stayed with her all night, translating for the doctors. Sandra sits next to her, still in her work uniform, while Michael serves water in elegant glass cups, so different from the plastic cups he usually uses. "Life has a funny way of working," Eleanor continues. "That mother and I became friends. She took care of Thomas when I needed to go back to work after I became a widow." Michael observes the 2 women talking, noticing how their differences seem to melt away. Sandra tells about the time an elderly passenger missed his flight because of an asthma attack and how she stayed after her shift to help him. Eleanor listens, nodding, understanding. "You remind me of Thomas," Eleanor says softly, looking at Michael. "He always puts others first, even when sick. Last week from his hospital bed, he was still trying to teach online music lessons to his special students." Her voice breaks. "He says kindness is like music. It needs to be shared to make sense." Michael feels something warm in his chest, a growing understanding. His actions today weren't just about helping a lady in difficulty. They were about continuing a chain of kindness that began long before him. He looks at his mother, who cleans this airport floor every day but has built an invisible network of support and respect, and finally understands the true meaning of strength. Michael observes the airport movement through the VIP room windows, the same scenery he sees every day, but now different. The hurried executives, families with suitcases, uniformed employees, all seem connected in an invisible web of stories and needs. His old backpack rests next to a leather armchair, the math books forgotten inside it. Today he learned something that no equation could teach. He watches his mother talking with Eleanor, her calloused hands gesturing while she speaks, and realizes that she always knew this truth. You don't need to have much to give something important. Every person who passes through here has a story, Eleanor comments, following his gaze to the busy terminal. Like you, Michael, studying here every day, or your mother, keeping everything running. She smiles, color gradually returning to her face. Sometimes we just need to stop and really see people. Sandra shares stories from her years at the airport. The baby born in Terminal C's bathroom, the musician who gave an impromptu show during a 5-hour delay, the elderly couple who reunited after 50 years. Michael realizes that this place he considered just a waiting room is actually a meeting point of thousands of lives. The VIP room door opens, and a supervisor enters, his golden badge shining under the lights. Mrs. Thompson? He holds a paper in his hands. We managed to locate your luggage in Boston. We're in contact with a local pharmacy for your medications, and the airport pharmacy will provide your medications in an hour, the supervisor explains, consulting his notes. We contacted your doctor in Boston. He sent the prescription by fax. Eleanor releases a deep sigh, years of tension melting from her shoulders. Sandra gently squeezes the lady's hand, while Michael watches the scene unfold. The supervisor, Jim, according to his badge, continues. As for tomorrow's flight, we've secured priority boarding, 9:15, gate B12. He pauses, checking his tablet. You'll arrive in Boston at 10:30, plenty of time for Thomas's surgery, Eleanor completes, tears of relief running down her face. It's at 2 Sao. Michael feels his own body relax, hadn't realized how tense he was. The supervisor smiles, a genuine smile that transforms his serious face. And about tonight, Jim continues, the airport hotel has a room available, courtesy of the airline, considering the circumstances. He hands an envelope with documents to Eleanor. A staff member will accompany you there after the medications arrive. Sandra still holds Eleanor's hand, who now cries openly. See, she says softly. I told you we'd figure something out. Michael observes his mother, noticing how she seems stronger, taller somehow, even in her simple cleaning uniform. The supervisor gives a small bow and leaves, leaving behind a feeling that sometimes the world conspires in favor of kindness. Eleanor searches through her purse with hands now firmer, but still trembling slightly. Michael and Sandra observe in silence, the VIP room air heavy with expectation. I need to find... I know it's here somewhere, she murmurs, pushing aside tissues and documents. Sandra shifts uncomfortably in her chair, her uniform making a slight noise against the leather. Michael notices that his mother still hasn't taken off her rubber gloves from her pocket. Her shift ended hours ago, but the duty to help speaking louder than tiredness. Ah, here it is, Eleanor exclaims softly, her voice stronger than before. Her fingers hold something small and shiny. Michael realizes they are actually 2 objects, a golden card and an envelope. The card reflects the soft light of the VIP room, elegant letters embossed in relief. Sandra leans slightly forward, her eyebrows furrowed in contained curiosity. Eleanor holds the card as if it were something precious, turning it in her hand several times before speaking. Michael notices that her hands are trembling for a different reason now, No longer fear or anxiety, but something else. Before showing this, Eleanor takes a deep breath. I need you to know something. She places the card in her lap, smoothing it with careful fingers. The late afternoon light coming through the VIP room windows makes the card shine like real gold. Eleanor Thompson, Executive Director, New Beginnings Foundation. Michael reads aloud, the golden letters shining under the light. His mother leans in to see better, her hands still covered by work rubber gloves. For 40 years, Eleanor begins, her voice firmer now. Our foundation has helped young people from working families get to university. She touches the card gently. But today, for the first time in a long time, I was the one who needed help. And you, her voice falters for a moment. You helped me without knowing who I was, expecting nothing in return. Sandra automatically straightens her posture. Years of service taught her to become tense around executives, but Eleanor takes her hand, ignoring the rubber gloves. No, please. Continue being exactly who you are. She turns to Michael. You are the kind of student our foundation looks for. Michael feels his heart race when Eleanor opens the envelope. We have a special full scholarship program, not just tuition. We cover housing, books, everything. She smiles, looking directly into his eyes. For exceptional young people who understand that true education isn't just in books, but in how we treat others. The program starts in high school, Eleanor explains, her voice gaining energy. We follow the scholars through college, guidance, tutoring, internships. She opens more papers from the envelope, revealing photos of young people in graduation gowns. These are some of our students from last year, Harvard, Yale, MIT. Sandra squeezes Michael's hand so hard he feels the rubber gloves stick to his skin. He sees silent tears running down his mother's face, who always dreamed of better education for her son. Years of worry about tuition and expensive books begin to melt in her eyes. We have partnerships with the best universities in the country, Eleanor continues, spreading colorful brochures on the center table. And most importantly, we focus on students who demonstrate not just academic excellence, but character. She looks directly at Michael. As you demonstrated today. Michael feels his face heat up. Mrs. Eleanor, I didn't help expecting anything in return. His voice comes out lower than intended. I just did what any person should do. Sandra releases his hand, only to put her arm around his shoulders, pride overflowing in her gesture. Exactly because of that, Eleanor smiles, her eyes shining. You acted with genuine compassion, even when it meant risking getting into trouble. That kind of character can't be taught in any school. That's exactly what you just said, Michael. Eleanor leans forward in her chair, her eyes shining with renewed intensity. True kindness doesn't expect reward. You helped me even thinking I was just a confused elderly woman. Used your last money to buy me tea. Risked trouble with your mother to ensure I was okay. Michael shifts uncomfortably in his chair, his hands gripping the golden card. The setting sun through the VIP room windows paints orange shadows on the floor, making the moment seem even more surreal. I learned from my mother, he says quietly. She always helps people, even after a double shift. Sandra sobs softly beside him, trying to disguise her tears with the back of her rubber gloves. Eleanor takes her hand again. And you, Sandra, raised an extraordinary son, even facing so many difficulties, alone, working hard, without losing his humanity. Michael observes his mother, her worn uniform, her calloused hands, her face marked by years of hard work, and sees for the first time not just sacrifice, but strength, a strength that she passed on to him, not through words, but through daily examples of perseverance and kindness. Sandra wipes her tears with her uniform sleeve, unable to speak. Her body shakes with silent sobs of relief and pride. Years of worry about her son's future begin to dissolve in the tears she can no longer hold back. Michael turns to his mother, seeing her cry openly now, she who always tried to hide her tears from him. Without thinking, he hugs her tightly, smelling the familiar scent of cleaning products on her uniform mixed with that cheap perfume she's worn for years. "Mom," is all he can say, his own voice breaking. Sandra holds her son against her chest, her rubber gloves still on her hands, staining his shirt with a few drops of disinfectant. But it doesn't matter. Nothing matters beyond this moment, where all her sacrifice, all the sleepless nights worried about bills, all the extra work suddenly makes sense. Eleanor observes in respectful silence, her own eyes welling up. She sees in them the reflection of her own story, the struggles, the sacrifices, the strength that only a mother knows. The setting sun casts a golden glow through the VIP room windows, enveloping the three in an almost magical light. "Sorry to interrupt," the soft voice of Supervisor Jim breaks the moment. He's standing at the door, holding some documents. "Mrs. Thompson's medications have arrived and the hotel room is ready. I can arrange transportation right now." Michael and Sandra slowly separate, both discreetly wiping tears. The moment is broken, but the feeling remains that something deep and permanent has changed in their lives this afternoon at the airport. Michael helps the supervisor organize Mrs. Eleanor's belongings, noticing how Jim now smiles at him, treating him like a colleague and not like the boy he always watches suspiciously. Maria from cleaning passes by the door, nodding respectfully, not just to Sandra anymore, but to him too. "Your medications, ma'am." A uniformed nurse enters, delivering a small pharmacy bag. Eleanor takes the medicine with ice water served in elegant glasses. Her color has improved considerably, and her hands don't shake as much anymore. "Thanks to you both," she whispers, looking at Michael and Sandra. Joe, the security guard who used to follow him through the corridors, appears at the door, offering to carry the luggage to the hotel. Michael notices how the environment has changed. He's no longer invisible, no longer suspect. In just a few hours, he has become part of this airport community that his mother has always known. "I need your address," Eleanor says, taking a golden pen from her purse. "And your phone, email, everything. The foundation will contact you this week." She pauses, holding the pen in the air. "That is, if you want, Michael. The choice is yours." Sandra is already looking for paper in her worn bag, her hands still covered by rubber gloves, trembling slightly with emotion. Michael takes the paper, writing his address with extra care, each letter like a step toward a future that hours ago seemed impossible. Michael carefully notes down the address of the small apartment where he lives with his mother, the worn post office box number, the cracked cell phone he shares with Sandra. Each piece of information seems more meaningful now, like pieces of a larger puzzle that's beginning to take shape. "I'll call as soon as Thomas is out of surgery," Eleanor promises, carefully storing the paper in her leather agenda. "And when I return from Boston, we need to talk about your future, Michael." She smiles, that maternal smile he knows so well already, even after just a few hours. Sandra stores the foundation's golden card in her worn bag as if it were a precious relic, her hands still shaking slightly. "Are you sure you'll be all right here?" she asks, the instinct to care still strong even after all the day's exhaustion. "Thanks to you both, I'll be great," Eleanor responds, now looking years younger than when Michael found her collapsed in the terminal. "Sometimes angels appear wearing cleaning uniforms and worn sneakers," she adds with a gentle smile. The sky beyond the VIP room windows is already dark, dotted with lights from planes taking off and landing. Michael looks at his watch, almost time for the last bus home. But something has changed. The same airport, the same way back, but now carrying something new. Hope. Don't forget the 9 p.m. medicines, Michael reminds Eleanor, arranging the small pharmacy bag on the table next to her. Sandra smiles, recognizing in her son the same protective instinct she always had. And if anything happens, the nurse is at extension 232, he adds, memorizing all the details of the day. Eleanor stands up to hug them, first Sandra, then Michael. You saved more than my day, she whispers. You saved my chance to be with my son tomorrow. Her words carry the weight of gratitude that goes beyond the moment. Sandra squeezes her hands one last time, rubber gloves meeting fingers with a gold ring. I'll pray for Thomas, Sandra promises, her voice soft, and you rest well. Michael observes the two women, so different in their circumstances, so equal in their maternal love. Eleanor nods, tears shining again in her eyes. And I'll be grateful every day that I stumbled near you. Joe, the security guard, waits patiently at the door to escort Eleanor to the hotel. Michael and Sandra begin to walk away, but she calls them one last time. Remember, this isn't an end, it's a beginning. Her words echo through the VIP room, carrying promises of change. Mother and son walk through the now almost empty airport corridors, their steps echoing on the marble. Sandra still in her uniform, Michael with his worn backpack. But something has changed. They walk more upright, as if a weight had been lifted from their shoulders, replaced by something lighter. Possibility. You have a huge heart, son. Sandra breaks the silence as they walk, her voice choked but proud. Just like your grandfather. He also always stopped to help everyone. She finally takes off her rubber gloves, storing them in the pocket of her wrinkled uniform. Michael observes the empty corridors, so different from the afternoon chaos. You know, Mum, I learned something today. He stops for a moment, looking at the plastic chairs where he spends his afternoons. I thought this place only reminded me of what we didn't have. But today, I saw that we have something that no money can buy. Sandra puts her arm around her son's shoulders, feeling him taller, more mature than this morning. I saw you grow today, she whispers, not in height, but here. She lightly touches his chest. The fluorescent lights flicker above them, creating dancing shadows on the marble floor. You always taught me that, Michael responds, his voice firmer. Every day, cleaning this place, treating everyone with respect, even those who don't reciprocate. They pass by Gate B42, his usual study spot now empty and silent. The math books in his backpack somehow feel lighter. Look, Sandra stops, pointing to the chair with the small crack where Michael always sits. Looks different now, doesn't it? Michael nods, realizing that space is no longer just a waiting place, but where his life began to change. Tomorrow, when I sit here, Michael lightly touches the cracked chair. I'll remember that sometimes life's best moments happen in the most unlikely places. His hand passes over the worn plastic surface, each scratch now telling a different story. Sandra observes her son, noticing how he seems taller under the terminal's nightlights. You know, son, maybe this place has been more than a waiting room all this time. She adjusts the badge on her wrinkled uniform. This is where you learned about real life, about how to treat people. And about how people aren't always what they seem, Michael adds, thinking of Eleanor. A lady who seemed to need help ended up being the one who could help. He looks at his mother, seeing in her also a strength that was always there, but that he only now fully understands. They cross the almost empty parking lot, their steps echoing on the concrete. Sandra's old car waits in the same place as always, but even it seems different now, no longer a symbol of limitation, but of possibility. Tomorrow, Sandra says while searching for her keys, when you're studying here, remember, You're not just waiting for me. You're preparing for your future. Michael opens the passenger door, the metal creaking familiarly. They're exhausted, hungry, but something new shines in their eyes. A certainty that sometimes fate chooses the most unlikely places to change our lives. Harvard, Michael whispers, looking through the car's stained window while Sandra maneuvers to leave the parking lot. I never thought it could be possible. His hands grip the backpack in his lap, feeling the weight of the books differently now. Sandra turns on the radio softly, that old song that always plays when they return home. You've always been capable of everything, son. You just needed a chance. She stops at a red light, her hands still smelling of cleaning products gripping the worn steering wheel. You know what makes me most proud? It wasn't the possibility of the scholarship. It was seeing the man you're becoming. Michael watches the city lights passing through the window, colored blurs against the dark sky. Sometimes, he begins hesitantly, I'm afraid of dreaming too big, of disappointing you. It's the first time he admits this out loud. Sandra swallows hard, her hands gripping the steering wheel tighter. Your father. She takes a deep breath before continuing. He used to say dreams were a waste of time, that we should be content with our place. She shakes her head slightly. But today you proved he was wrong about many things. The old car creaks while turning a corner, the familiar sound now carrying new meanings. Michael looks at his mother, seeing silent tears shining on her tired face under the streetlights. Maybe he needed to leave, Michael says softly, surprising both himself and Sandra. So we could learn that kindness and strength have nothing to do with being man or woman, rich or poor. He looks at his own hands, remembering how they held Eleanor's today. You taught me more about being a real man than he ever could. Sandra takes a deep breath, her hands relaxing slightly on the steering wheel. A distant siren cuts through the night, mixing with the familiar rumble of the old engine. You know I always wanted to give you more, she begins, her voice trembling. A bigger house, better clothes. You gave me everything that matters, Michael interrupts, his voice firm. You taught me to see people for real, like you do at the airport, to help those in need, even when we're in need ourselves. He gently touches his mother's arm. You're the one who taught me to be the kind of person Mrs. Eleanor saw today. The car turns onto the familiar street, the dim lights of the housing complex appearing ahead. Their building, with its peeling paint and poorly lit entrance, has never seemed so welcoming. You know, Sandra says while parking, sometimes life's best lessons come from the greatest difficulties. They look up at the third-floor window, where a faint light glows, the one they always leave on, their small refuge, silent witness to their struggles, and now their renewed hopes. Do we still have bread? Michael asks while turning on the light in the small kitchen.